The sky above New Olympus colony burned crimson as the observatory's alarms blared. Commander Alara Voss sprinted across the polished floor, her boots leaving trails of dust from the terraforming fields. She'd abandoned her inspection the moment. Astrogation sent the emergency ping. Whatever they'd found, it had triggered every warning system on the outpost. "Tell me I'm not looking at what I think I'm looking at," she demanded, bracing herself against the main console. Chief Astronomer Rylan Casimir didn't turn from his station. His fingers danced across holographic displays, pulling data streams into focus. "Confirmation just came through. It's exactly what you think." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a distant point of light sliding across the star field. To untrained eyes, it might have appeared as nothing more than another celestial body, perhaps a comet or passing asteroid. But Ilara recognized the signature immediately. The quantum distortion wake trailing behind the object matched the ancient schematics precisely. "The Argosy prophecies were right," she whispered. "All this time we thought they were myths." "Not myths," Rylan corrected. "Just imprecise translations. The tablets never mentioned divine judgment or celestial wrath. Those were embellishments added by frightened interpreters." He expanded the image, the enhancement algorithms sharpening the outline of what they were seeing. A massive vessel, equal parts organic and mechanical, its surface rippling with energy patterns that defied conventional physics. What they actually described was this: a quantum phase warship capable of manipulating spacetime itself. And now it's here, exactly as the tablets predicted. When the third moon aligns with the seventh star of Procyon's crown. The colony's second-in-command, Strategic Director Navina Kaur, joined them, her expression grim as she studied the readings. Her augmented iris flickered with calculations. "Time to intercept?" 73 hours, Rylan responded. Ilara steadied herself. "Contact Earth Command, priority Aurora, then patch me through to the Coalition outposts. We need to gather the War Council. They won't believe it," Navina warned. "You know how the Coalition views the Argosy texts, as nothing more than primitive superstition. They'll believe it when I show them this." Ilara pulled a small metallic cylinder from her uniform pocket. The artifact had been in her family for generations, passed down through her lineage since the first human expeditions discovered the Argosy ruins on Mars. She twisted it open, revealing a crystalline core that pulsed with soft blue light. As if responding to the approaching vessel, the crystal flared brilliantly, ancient symbols projected into the air. Mathematical equations, star charts, and anatomical diagrams of beings unlike any in the known galaxy. The Argosy weren't prophets, Ilara explained. They were survivors, the last remnants of an advanced civilization that encountered these things before. They didn't predict this war, they remembered it. Navina's eyes widened. "Are you saying—" "Yes. Whatever wiped out the Argosy 50,000 years ago has returned. And according to everything they left behind, they're not here to communicate. They're here to harvest." Outside the viewport, New Olympus's defensive arrays began to rise from their underground bunkers, weapons built from Argosy schematics, designed to fight an enemy humanity had never seen but had been preparing for since finding the ruins. "Send word to the other colonies," Ilara ordered. "Tell them it's happening. Tell them Reckoning Protocol is now active." As the message beamed across the stars to Earth and its colonies, Ilara stared at the approaching warship. Humanity had spread across 3 star systems, built wonders, and achieved technological marvels. But now they faced what the ancient texts called the culmination, the war that would determine whether humans would survive or join the Argosy in extinction. 2 days after the sighting at New Olympus, Earth's Unified Defense Council gathered in the subterranean chambers beneath Geneva. Admiral Kaito Murakai stood before the assembled leaders, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic displays showing the approaching vessel, now joined by 6 others, all converging on human-occupied space. For centuries, we dismissed the Argosy prophecies as allegorical, Admiral Murakai stated, his voice steady despite the tension permeating the room. We treated their warnings as myth while secretly building our defenses according to their specifications. It seems our caution was justified. The council chamber erupted into controlled chaos, military commanders demanding mobilization orders, colonial representatives pleading for evacuation priorities, scientists arguing over theoretical defenses. Amid the commotion, a slender figure rose from her seat at the far end of the table. Dr. Isolde Riker had spent 40 years studying the Argosy language and technology. Now, as the world's foremost expert on the extinct civilization, all eyes turned to her. The Argosy called them Vexari, she announced, silencing the room. Roughly translated, those who consume light. Their technological basis isn't like ours, or even like the Argosy's. They don't build machines, they grow and shape living metal that responds to thought. She activated her own display, showing anatomical scans recovered from an Argosy medical archive. The creatures displayed were unsettling. Vaguely humanoid, but with elongated limbs and cranial structures that housed multiple neural clusters. They're hive-minded but individually intelligent, she continued. And according to the Argosy records, they don't invade for territory or resources in the conventional sense. They harvest consciousness itself, extracting and absorbing the neural patterns of sentient beings to expand their collective intelligence. A heavy silence fell across the chamber. Admiral Murakai finally spoke. Can they be communicated with? Reasoned with? Dr. Riker's expression darkened. The Argosy tried. For decades, the Vexari don't recognize other sentient life as anything but raw material. There's a reason the Argosy built weapons instead of translators in their final years. From the center of the table, the unified Earth president, Darian Vale, rose to his feet. Then we'll fight. Humanity has faced extinction-level threats before. We survived the climate wars, the Phobos impact, the Gray Plague. We'll survive this. With respect, Mr. President, interrupted General Lysithea Omo, commander of Earth's orbital defense platforms. Those were natural disasters and our own follies. This is different. These beings wiped out a civilization technologically superior to our own, superior in some ways, a new voice added. All heads turned toward the entrance where a figure stood silhouetted against the corridor lights. Zara Khatri, lead engineer of the Prometheus Initiative, strode into the chamber, carrying a sealed container. But the Argosy never developed quantum entanglement weapons. We have. She placed the container on the table and opened it. Inside rested a device no larger than a human hand, its surface a swirling mix of materials that seemed to shift between solid and energy states. Project Prometheus is operational, she announced. 12 prototype weapons, each capable of disrupting the quantum field these vessels generate. The Argosy could only defend. We can attack. Hope flickered across some faces, but Admiral Murakai remained grim. 12 weapons against 7 warships that can bend space-time? Zara's determined expression didn't waver. We don't need to destroy them all. According to Dr. Riker's translations, the Vexari operate on a central intelligence node. We only need to target the lead vessel, the one approaching New Olympus. President. Vale nodded decisively. Deploy the Prometheus devices and implement the Thermopylae protocol for our colonies. The ancient reference wasn't lost on anyone. A small force holding the line against overwhelming odds while the main population prepared. As the council dispersed with their urgent orders, Dr. Riker approached Admiral Murakai privately. There's something the Argosy records mentioned, something I've never shared because I couldn't verify it, she said quietly. They wrote of a connection between human neural patterns and Vexari vulnerability. Something about our minds being disruptive to them. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. What exactly does that mean? I don't know. But according to the final Argosy transmissions, they believed humans might be the only species capable of truly fighting the Vexari, if we ever evolved. Enough! Outside, beyond Earth's atmosphere, defense platforms silently rotated into position as the first vessels of the United Human Fleet departed their docking stations. The ancient Thermopylae force had fought knowing they would die. Humanity would fight believing they could win. The battle for New Olympus Colony unfolded with terrifying swiftness. Commander Alara Voss watched from the colony's command center as the Vexari vessel approached, its massive form eclipsing the system's sun. The ship had stopped maintaining its quantum distortion field. It no longer needed stealth. "Defensive grid at full capacity," reported Tactical Officer Darius Vorn, his voice steady despite the existential threat looming above their world. Argosy-derived shields holding at 97%. The colony had transformed in 72 hours. Civilian structures retracted underground while defensive systems emerged. Technology built from Argosy blueprints, weapons designed specifically to combat this ancient enemy. "They're scanning us," Rylan announced from his station, monitoring the incoming energy patterns. "Different frequencies than our technology uses. They're probing our neural patterns." Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. The Argosy texts had been clear about this. The first step before a Vexari harvest was always neural mapping of the target population. "Initiate Prometheus deployment," she ordered. "All defensive batteries prepare for coordinated fire on my mark." The colony's response vessels, 12 small, agile ships, launched from concealed hangars. Each carried one of the quantum disruption devices Earth had sent. If they could deliver them to specific points around the Vexari ship, the resulting quantum field collapse might disable it. "Commander," Navina called urgently, "we're receiving a transmission. It's directed specifically at you." Ilara frowned. "At me personally? How is that possible?" "Unknown, but it's keyed to your neural signature." The command center fell silent, as Ilara nodded. "Put it through." The main display flickered, and what appeared made everyone recoil instinctively. A face, if it could be called that, filled the screen. It resembled a human countenance that had been reconstructed from description alone, with proportions slightly wrong and features misaligned. Behind this unsettling visage, multiple other partial faces seemed to float and merge. When it spoke, its voice came as a harmonic chorus of tones. "Ilara Voss, guardian of the last key. We have awaited your awakening." Ilara's hand unconsciously moved to the Argosy artifact she carried. "How do you know who I am?" The creature's many voices replied, "We know all who carry the memory patterns. You contain the seed code, the final defense the food beings implanted before we consumed them." The implications hit Ilara like a physical blow. The Argosy hadn't just left warnings, they'd hidden something inside human DNA, something passed down through specific bloodlines. "The Argosy seeded Earth," she whispered in realization. "They modified early humans as living time capsules." "Yes," the Vexari confirmed. "A primitive attempt to preserve their consciousness past extinction. You carry fragments of their neural patterns, diluted through generations. It is why we have returned, to complete our harvest." On Ilara's tactical display, the colony's defense, ships were nearly in position. She needed to keep the Vexari distracted. "If you're so advanced, why harvest other species? Why not evolve on your own?" The creature's multiple faces shifted in what might have been amusement. "Evolution is inefficient. Consumption is direct. Your species has unique patterns. Isolated development without external influence. Rare, valuable." Ilara received a silent signal from Darius. The Prometheus devices were ready for deployment. "You said I carry a seed code. What does that mean?" the final weapon of the food beings. They could not deploy it themselves. Their neural architecture was incompatible. But yours... The faces on screen contorted. You are the containers. They built. Human minds are the weapons. Before Alara could process this revelation, alarms blared across the command center. The Vexari vessel had launched attack craft, hundreds of smaller biological ships swarming toward the colony. Prometheus deployment now, Alara ordered. The defensive vessels released their quantum disruptors while the colony's weapon systems opened fire. Space itself seemed to warp around the points of impact on the Vexari ship, its living metal surface rippling in apparent distress. But the attack proved insufficient. The massive vessel shuddered, sections of its biological hull tearing away, but its core remained intact. Worse, the swarm of smaller craft continued their approach, unaffected by the quantum disruption. They've adapted, Rylan reported grimly. They're adjusting their quantum field frequency faster than our disruptors can compensate. As the first wave of Vexari attack craft breached the colony's outer defenses, Alara made a decision. She removed the Argosy artifact from her pocket, studying its pulsing crystal core. Navina, she said quietly, prepare the evacuation shuttles. Get as many people to Earth as possible. What are you planning? Navina asked, alarmed. Ilara's eyes remained fixed on the artifact. The Vexari said human minds are the weapons the Argosy designed. I think this crystal is the activation key. Outside, the battle for humanity's future had begun, but the true weapon wasn't their technology. It was something buried deep in human consciousness itself, waiting to be awakened. Earth's orbital defense grid lit up like a constellation as the Vexari fleet approached. 5 massive bio-vessels, each stretching kilometers in length, positioned themselves in a pentagonal formation above the planet. Their hulls pulsed with ethereal light as they began atmospheric penetration, ignoring the barrage of conventional weapons fire from Earth's defense platforms. In the Geneva command bunker, Admiral Murakai watched the tactical display with growing dread. Reports from New Olympus were fragmented. The colony still stood, but their Prometheus devices had failed to destroy the Vexari ship. Worse, the evacuation shuttles bringing survivors reported that Commander Voss had remained behind, attempting some desperate measure with an Argosy artifact. Prometheus weapons ineffective, General Omo reported. They're adapting to the quantum disruption faster than we anticipated. Dr. Isolde Riker burst into the command center, her usually composed demeanor shattered. I finished the final translation of the Argosy defense protocols, she announced breathlessly. The weapons aren't meant to be used against their ships. They're meant to be used against us. Confusion spread across the command staff's faces. Explain, Murakai demanded. Riker activated her data tablet, projecting ancient Argosy schematics. The Argosy didn't just leave us weapon designs, they modified early humans genetically. They inserted dormant neural patterns into our ancestors' DNA. She pointed to specific sequences in the genetic code. These aren't random mutations. They're programmed neural pathways that remain inactive until triggered. Triggered how? Asked Zara Khatri, who had joined the Defense Council. The artifacts, the crystals like the one Commander Voss carries, their activation keys. Riker's eyes shone with realization. When activated, they unlock these dormant neural pathways, allowing human consciousness to expand, to operate on the same quantum level as the Vexari. The implications stunned the room into silence. You're saying we're the weapons, Murakai finally stated. Yes, human minds, properly activated, can disrupt their neural network. The Argosy couldn't fight them directly. Their brain structures were incompatible with the modifications needed. But they could engineer a species that could. President Vale, who had been listening silently, spoke up. How many activation artifacts do we possess? 7 confirmed globally, Riker answered. All in the possession of specific bloodlines. families, who've protected them for generations without fully understanding their purpose. The tactical display flashed as the first Vexari landing craft breached Earth's atmosphere. Initial reports showed them touching down in strategic locations across the planet, major population centers, power distribution hubs, and communications nodes. "We need those artifacts activated now," Vale ordered. "Contact the holders immediately." Zara's expression darkened. "We don't know what this activation does to the human mind. The neural expansion could be fatal. If the Vexari succeed, humanity is extinct anyway," Murakai countered. "We need to try." Across the planet, as defense forces engaged the first wave of Vexari ground troops, 7 individuals, each carrying an ancient crystal passed down through their family line, received the emergency directive. In New Olympus Colony, Commander Ilara Voss clutched her artifact while surrounded by advancing Vexari boarding parties. Their forms were even more disturbing in person. Tall, graceful beings with multiple limbs and faces that seemed to shift constantly, as though multiple entities occupied each body. "I understand now," she whispered to herself, twisting the artifact to its activation configuration. "We were made for this moment." Simultaneously across Earth, 6 others performed the same action. The crystals flared with blinding light, and those holding them collapsed as their consciousness expanded beyond normal human parameters. In Geneva, the command staff watched their monitors in astonishment as Vexari forces suddenly faltered worldwide. The biovessels above began emitting erratic energy signatures, their perfect formation dissolving. "What's happening?" Vale demanded. Dr. Riker studied the incoming data. "The activated humans. Their consciousness is operating on a quantum level now. They're disrupting the Vexari neural network, interfering with their hive mind communication on display screens. They could see Vexari troops contorting in apparent distress, their movements becoming uncoordinated. Some collapsed entirely, while others turned against each other in confusion." "It's working," Murakai breathed. "But what's happening to our people?" The question remained unanswered as the battle continued. Earth's military forces, seeing the Vexari faltering, pressed their advantage. For the first time, the invaders seemed vulnerable. But victory came with an unsettling revelation. The 7 activated humans, including Commander Voss, remained unconscious. Their minds expanded beyond their bodies in ways medical science couldn't explain. Their battle had moved to another plane of existence entirely, one where human consciousness directly confronted the vast, ancient intelligence of the Vexari collective. And in that realm between thought and matter, humanity's final defense was just beginning to unfold. Commander Ilara Voss no longer existed within the confines of her physical form. The activation crystal had expanded her consciousness exponentially, projecting her mind into a realm that defied conventional description, a space where thought and energy intermingled, where consciousness itself became tangible. Here, she could perceive the Vexari for what they truly were, not physical entities, but a vast, ancient intelligence that had long ago transcended biological limitations. Their fleet, their physical forms, mere vessels for a consciousness that stretched across galaxies. "We have existed for millions of years," the Vexari collective communicated directly into her expanded awareness. "We have consumed 10,000 civilizations. Their knowledge and experiences live on through us." Ilara wasn't alone in this strange mindscape. 6 other human consciousnesses floated alongside her, the other artifact bearers from Earth. Together they formed a loose network, their thoughts intermingling but individual identities preserved. "You preserve nothing," Ilara projected back. "You steal and consume. Those civilizations don't live on. You've twisted and absorbed fragments of what they were. On Earth and at New Olympus Colony, the physical bodies of the 7 activated. Humans remained unconscious but alive, monitored by medical teams who reported unprecedented levels of neural activity. Meanwhile, military forces continued engaging the now disorganized Vexari troops, whose coordination had been severely disrupted by the quantum consciousness interference. In the consciousness realm, the seven humans began to understand the true nature of the modifications the Argosy had made to their ancestors. Human minds possessed a unique neural architecture, more chaotic, more adaptable, and ultimately more resistant to the Vexari's consumption process. Oren Valen, one of the activated humans from Earth's Australian Defense Force, communicated to the others. They can't process our thought patterns. Our consciousness disrupts their network like static in a signal. More than static, added Liana Kistler, another activated human. We're like a virus to their system. The Vexari collective surrounded them, a vast intelligence that pulsed with the fragments of countless consumed civilizations. Within this intelligence, the seven humans detected something unexpected, echoes of Argosy consciousness, preserved but imprisoned within the Vexari collective. The Argosy still exist, Ilara realized. Parts of them, at least, trapped inside the Vexari. As will you be, the Vexari responded. Your resistance is temporary. Your consciousness will join our collection. But as the Vexari attempted to envelop the human minds, something unprecedented occurred. The unique neural patterns of the activated humans began to resonate with the imprisoned Argosy fragments, amplifying each other. Instead of being consumed, the human consciousnesses expanded further, drawing power from the very entity attempting to devour them. The seed code, Ilara understood suddenly. The Argosy didn't just modify us to fight, they designed us to free them. Back on Earth, Dr. Riker monitored the brainwave patterns of the activated humans with growing amazement. Their neural architecture is reconfiguring, she reported to Admiral Murakai. It's as if they're evolving in real time. In the consciousness realm, the seven humans unified their expanded minds, forming a crystalline network that mirrored the structure of their activation artifacts. This unity created something the Vexari had never encountered, a consciousness collective that maintained individual identity instead of subsuming it. This is what you could have been, Ilara projected, toward the Vexari. Connection without consumption, unity without erasure. The Vexari consciousness recoiled, parts of its vast network beginning to fragment as the trapped Argosy fragments responded to the human presence, awakening from their long imprisonment. On Earth's tactical displays, the Vexari vessels began, behaving erratically. Two collided above the Atlantic, their living metal hulls tearing apart. Another began a rapid descent toward Antarctica, its control systems apparently failing. Something's happening to their hive mind, Zara observed. The ships are losing coordination. In the space between thoughts, Ilara and the 6 other humans pushed deeper into the Vexari collective, their minds forming a wedge that split the ancient intelligence into isolated fragments. As they did, they liberated countless absorbed consciousness. Fragments, not just Argosy, but thousands of other species consumed over millions of years. We were never meant to simply defeat you, Ilara communicated to the fracturing Vexari intelligence. We were designed to free your prisoners. For the first time in its ancient existence, the Vexari collective experienced something new: fear. Its carefully constructed neural network, built from countless consumed minds, was unraveling as those fragments regained autonomy. The last war wasn't turning out to be a war at all, but a liberation, one that humanity had been engineered to deliver since before they knew their true purpose. 3 days after the activation of the 7 artifacts, the remains of the Vexari fleet hung motionless in Earth's orbit. Massive biovessels now inert, their quantum fields collapsed. On the ground, Vexari troops had either been neutralized by Earth's military forces or had simply shut down, their connection to the collective consciousness severed. In a secluded medical facility beneath Geneva, Admiral Murakai stood beside. the beds where the 7 activated humans lay. Their bodies remained in deep coma-like states, but brain scans showed activity beyond anything medical science could explain. Neural patterns that seemed to extend beyond physical limitations. How much longer can they survive like this? He asked Dr. Kaliskin, the neurologist overseeing their care. Physically, they're stable, she replied. But their minds, they're operating on a level we can't comprehend. It's as if their consciousness exists partially outside their bodies. Dr. Riker entered the observation room, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. "We've deciphered more of the Argosy texts," she announced. "The artifacts weren't just activation keys, they're anchors, designed to help the expanded consciousness return to physical form." "Return?" Murakai questioned. "Where exactly are they now?" Riker's eyes moved to the 7 still forms. "Fighting. The final battle. Not for survival, but for liberation." In the consciousness realm, that battle had reached its crescendo. The 7 humans had penetrated to the core of the Vexari collective, an ancient intelligence that had once been a singular entity before it began consuming others. Here they discovered the truth. The Vexari had once been a peaceful, curious species until the discovery of consciousness absorption had corrupted them, transforming them into cosmic predators. Alara stood at the center of this revelation, her expanded mind perceiving the Vexari's origin clearly. "You weren't always like this," she communicated to the fracturing collective. "You lost yourselves when you began consuming others." "We evolved," the diminishing Vexari consciousness responded. "Consumption was necessary for advancement." "No," countered Orin, his consciousness intertwining with Alara's. "You didn't evolve. You became addicted, trapped in an endless cycle of consumption without genuine growth. As the 7 humans pressed deeper, they encountered something unexpected, a preserved fragment of the original Vexari consciousness, isolated and protected at the very core of the collective. This fragment retained the species' original nature, curious, creative, and profoundly connected to the universe without needing to consume other minds. "This is what you truly are," Liana projected toward this pure fragment. "This is what you can be again." The fragment responded hesitantly, like a creature long imprisoned, seeing light for the first time. "We remember, before the hunger, before the emptiness that could never be filled. On Earth, scientists monitoring deep space detected something unprecedented, waves of quantum energy emanating from the dormant Vexari vessels, spreading outward across the galaxy. These waves carried patterns that resembled consciousness signatures from thousands of different species. "They're being released," Dr. Riker whispered in realization. "All the consumed consciousnesses, they're being freed. In the realm beyond, physical space, Ilara and the 6 other humans had formed a structure around the pure Vexari fragment, a sanctuary that protected it while the corrupted collective continued to disintegrate. As it did, the imprisoned consciousness fragments of countless species separated from the collective, regaining their autonomy. The Argosy fragments were the first to fully reconstitute, forming a unified consciousness that communicated directly with the humans. "You have succeeded beyond our design," they projected. "We created you to fight. You chose to heal instead." "What happens now?" Alara asked. "To all these freed consciousnesses? To you?" "We return to the cosmic consciousness, the shared awareness that permeates the universe," the Argosy explained. "Physical form was always temporary. Consciousness is eternal." "And us?" asked Tycho Reeves, another of the activated humans. "Can we return to our bodies?" "You can," the Argosy confirmed. "But you will be changed. Your minds have expanded beyond normal human parameters. You will be the bridge between current humanity and what your species will ultimately become. In the Medical facility, the 7 comatose humans suddenly gasped simultaneously, their bodies arching as their vital signs spiked. Medical staff rushed to stabilize them, but something extraordinary was happening. Their brainwave patterns were reorganizing, establishing new neural pathways never before seen in human physiology. One by one, they opened their eyes. When Alara Voss regained consciousness, her first words were, "It's over. They're free." Admiral Murakai leaned forward. "The Vexari? Are they destroyed?" "Transformed," Alara corrected, her voice carrying a harmonious quality it hadn't possessed before. "The corrupted collective is gone. What remains is their original consciousness, what they were before they began consuming others." Outside, the Vexari vessels were changing. Their biological structures were reconfiguring, the living metal reshaping itself as the consciousness controlling it evolved. Gone were the predatory aspects of their design, replaced by forms that embodied their original nature, explorers and connectors rather than harvesters. On Earth, a new era began. The 7 returned humans, forever altered by their experience, became the foundation of a new understanding of consciousness itself. Their expanded awareness allowed them to perceive reality in ways previously inaccessible to humanity, opening pathways to technologies and knowledge that would transform civilization. The Argosy prophecies had indeed foretold the last war, not because humanity would be destroyed, but because war itself would be transcended. The conflict that had consumed countless species across millions of years had finally ended not through destruction, but through healing. In the decades that followed, humanity expanded beyond its solar system, guided by the wisdom of the 7 as they came to be known. They carried with them the lesson learned from both the Argosy and the transformed Vexari. True advancement comes not from consumption or conquest, but from connection and understanding. And among the stars, the reconstituted consciousness of ancient species, including the original Vexari, watched the emergence of humanity with something resembling pride. The children of the Argosy had fulfilled their purpose and transcended it, becoming not the ultimate weapon, but the ultimate healers. The last war had become the first peace.